We are now 2 weeks into this revival of Toonami that we so clamored for after April 1st. Now, I gotta be the first to admit that before April 1st of this year, after like 2009, the possibility of Toonami coming back, I really didn't see it happening. The people who canceled it are still working at Cartoon Network, so they weren't gonna bring it back. Adult Swim barely gave a crap about action cartoons, so they weren't gonna bring it back. I guess I should have had a little more faith in William Street, because sure enough, they brought it back. And the thing that absolutely astounds me is that some people still don't appreciate it. Future Gohan, for instance. And from now on, I will be referring to him as James, because I don't like to associate my favorite Dragon Ball character with someone who I have so many disagreements with. James says this isn't Toonami. He says it's just Adult Swim with a Toonami shell. Okay, I can understand his rationale in saying that, because, well, you look at the current Toonami lineup, and it's really not that different from any previous lineup of Adult Swim. Obviously, it's different from various lineups of Toonami because Toonami was a children's block. This Toonami is intended for adults, so you would have to figure it's not going to look that similar to one that was intended for children. That's just common sense. I don't know if he's even aware of this, but Sean Atkins and Jason DeMarco really wanted Cowboy Bebop to air on Toonami, but they wouldn't let them. They wouldn't even let them play it on the midnight run, because it was so violent. Well, that dream finally came true. And I remember back in 2006, when Viz recently announced that they were going to dub Bleach, and people were thinking, oh, is it going to go to Adult Swim? Is it going to go to Toonami? And I was always like, yeah, bring it to Toonami with Naruto and One Piece. Yeah, that would be great. Bleach belongs on Toonami. Well, Bleach didn't go to Toonami, and I must admit I was a little disappointed about that. But it was probably for the better, considering Naruto's not on TV anymore, and Bleach still is. However, about 6 years later, I finally have Bleach on Toonami. So, suck it, whoever I was arguing with about that 6 or so years ago. Feels good. I don't understand why people are so bent out of shape about Ghost in the Shell, the standalone complex, and Cowboy Bebop airing on Toonami. They're two of the best Japanese action animation series ever made. Ghost in the Shell, particularly the second gig, still looks amazing almost a decade later. It's hard to top that quality. I realize that both of those shows have been played continuously for several years now. But think about something. Imagine you are somebody who was watching this run of Ghost in the Shell for the first time. If you were doing that, then you were watching it for nearly a year. One episode a week. You were faithfully watching Ghost in the Shell. How pissed would you be if they just took it off with only 17 episodes left out of the 52? I'd be pissed. And you can't assume that everybody has already seen these shows. They're always finding new audiences. Cowboy Bebop is widely regarded as the king of Japanese cartoons. I'm not actually amazingly fond of it, but I respect it. I think it's great that both it and Ghost in the Shell are on Toonami. I think it's great that Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is on Toonami. I already admitted that I thought it was great that Bleach was on Toonami. It's kind of too bad that Bleach isn't so great anymore. I really don't understand why James is so bent out of shape about this. It's a solid group of action shows. What's the complaint? This isn't a Toonami that's playing Scooby-Doo and Generation O. I know we'd all like to forget Kids WB Toonami, but that happened. That crap happened. This is amazingly better than that. Maybe not the best lineup Toonami has ever had. It's certainly the ballsiest lineup Toonami's ever had, particularly for Dead Man Wonderland. But it's a very, very good Toonami lineup. It's a solid group of 6 action dramas. Maybe they don't have enough action for some people's tastes. Maybe there's a little too much talking, but I remember a considerable amount of talking going on in Naruto and Rurouni Kenshin. Lest we forget that the Big O was on Toonami before, and in reviewing shows like Outlaw Star, and certainly various Gundams, there's a whole lot of chatting going on in all of those too. They balanced it nicely with quality action sequences, but so do these shows. So, once again, I'm not seeing the issue. So that brings us to our 2 new shows. Dead Man Wonderland, which isn't even out on DVD yet, is getting the dub premiere on Toonami. And if you have an HD TV, then you are enjoying it in HD when nobody else legally can do that in America because of the Kadokawa Blu-ray situation, which is ridiculous, by the way. Granted, the entire thing is available in Japanese on Hulu, but that's par for the course in the case of anime getting on television. It's almost guaranteed that it's going to already be widely available on one of the many streaming services. And that is great. But that isn't a reason not to air anime on television. I understand that Dead Man Wonderland is nothing like anything that has ever aired on Toonami. If I had anything to compare it to, it would be way too much of a reach to even bother. That's a justifiable complaint, but once again, we're dealing with Toonami on Adult Swim, not Toonami on Cartoon Network. It is the kind of show that I might expect Adult Swim to play, but honestly, when I was thinking that maybe they would play this, after seeing a few episodes, I didn't think they'd ever have the balls to do it. I mean, this is a violent show. And Funimation decided to include a whole lot of cursing in the dub, most of which gets beeped, which is kind of funny in its own right. I know that there's differing opinions on the quality of Dead Man Wonderland, but I think it's pretty good so far. I've been enjoying it. I saw 4 episodes in Japanese before I heard that the dub would air on Toonami. I like it so far. I like the dub so far. What's not to like? So that brings us to Casshern's Sins. And I have to admit that maybe this was not such a good idea. Let me say I have enjoyed the first 2 episodes. I enjoy all the robot dismantling going on. All the extreme violence towards robots is very entertaining to me. I also like the kinds of philosophical shows that Adult Swim has aired from time to time. I like the philosophical stuff in Durarara. I like the philosophical stuff in Death Note. And I adore Adult Swim for playing Paranoia Agent because I probably never would have seen it otherwise. It's a pretty obvious observation that a show like Paranoia Agent doesn't really belong on the same block that airs Inuyasha, Family Guy, and Robot Chicken. But like I said, if they hadn't have played it, I probably never would have seen it before. So I'm eternally grateful, but it was probably not the best idea. Likewise, I was pretty happy to see they picked up Casshern because I wanted to watch it. I feel the same way about Steins Gate. I want to watch Steins Gate, so if it airs on Adult Swim Toonami, even easier for me to catch it. I do think Toonami should focus on heavier action shows and more episodic anime. Cowboy Bebop has generally always done good, and the main reason why that is, other than its overall quality, is it's very easy to get into. A show like Casshern's Sins, you're going to feel pretty lost if you don't watch from the beginning. And the same can be said of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. You could argue that Bleach, like Dragon Ball Z, is pretty easy to get into in the middle of, whatever story arc, because the story's not that complicated. But it seems like pretty common sense that serial action dramas are not going to do as well late on a Saturday night as an episodic one or a comedy. Once again, it's a fair assessment that Casshern is the kind of show that Adult Swim might have played otherwise. It is particularly similar to Kikaider, which they aired quite a while back, and I really enjoyed that show and the concept that a robot can't truly be human until it can do evil. That's some deep stuff involving robots there. And where it's stylistically similar to a previous Toonami show is obviously Cyborg 009, cut from a similar cloth of revamping a classic franchise. And they did play the 2003 Astro Boy on Toonami as well, so I guess you should count that. It's kind of poetic playing the revival of a classic franchise on the revival of a classic action block. That said, I'm concerned that this one isn't going to hit the mark. It seems pretty obvious to me that they got it in a package deal with Dead Man Wonderland because they didn't have a whole lot of money to work with. They probably went knocking on Funimation's door, saw what they had that was brand new, that wasn't already on DVD and totally overexposed, and decided, okay, we'll try this Dead Man Wonderland show. It's violent, it's gritty, people will love it. And then they had to do some digging, and they probably thought back to some shows that they were interested in for playing on Adult Swim Action before. They went looking around through Funimation's backlog to see if there was something that they could get on a package deal. Now consider Funimation's stance in this. Casshern Sins probably wasn't that big of a seller. It didn't make a big splash. It's going to be a better deal for them to get exposure to a series that didn't sell particularly well. Casshern Sins probably met its mark, or it might have been one of the shows that even missed its mark. It's a character that doesn't have a whole lot of relevance to American audiences. If you've never played Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, you might never have even heard of Casshern. I think one of the previous anime series got dubbed here at some point, but all I can find is some fractured clips on YouTube. For Funimation, this works out great. They're having Adult Swim play a brand new anime, Dead Man Wonderland, which is not on DVD and won't be for a while yet. Along with that, they're selling them Casshern Sins, which may or may not have made its sales, and they're looking to give it more exposure. Compare that to, say, Darker Than Black, another show which would have been great to pick up for Toonami, and it might have even been one of the shows that they were considering. Funimation doesn't have as much reason to get Darker Than Black on television because it's sold well enough. Now granted, television exposure will help pretty much any show, but it will help shows that are under the radar even more. Now, once again, this isn't any bit unlike what Toonami would normally offer. They would mix new shows, old shows, obscure shows, and the biggest hits around. One of the best parts of Toonami was the way that they would introduce you to new characters, new stories, new franchises, and pair them with familiar ones. That's what made Toonami work. So from that perspective, you have Bleach, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Ghost in the Shell, and Cowboy Bebop, 4 of the best known anime available in America. You pair that with one brand new show and one show that flew under the radar. Sounds like Toonami to me. One of James's other comments is that he wouldn't be so mad about these two particular shows if Funimation hadn't have tweeted and posted on Facebook a message to the fans asking them what they'd like to see on Toonami shortly after Toonami was announced that it was returning. I think they actually posted that on the very day that Toonami was announced to be returning. I've tried to explain to him in the comments that it is very, very, very unlikely that Toonami hadn't already picked out those shows before Funimation and Viz Media even asked fans about it. You just don't announce something at the upfront presentation to advertisers without particular shows in mind. I'm sure he's assuming because the press release didn't mention those particular shows that they didn't pick out any shows yet. Come on, man. William Street has been running Adult Swim for how long? Over a decade. And you think that they possibly put that little effort into picking the shows? That's a ridiculous argument. It really, really is. And even if that was true, and the reason why they couldn't get any of those bigger shows was money, why are you complaining about that? They're just being honest. They didn't buy Dragon Ball Z Kai because they didn't have the money to buy Dragon Ball Z Kai. Ridiculous. Now, getting on some other complaints that James has, one of which is it's only 2 new shows. Well, let me stop you right there, James. There's 3 premieres every Saturday on Toonami. Maybe you don't want to count Bleach, but it's still a new show, and they still have to pay for it. So right now, they have paid to keep 3 premieres going. That is pretty generous, don't you think? When was the last time that Toonami premiered 2 shows in the same month? If I had to take a stab, I would say it was Mare and the Prince of Tennis back at the tail end of December of 2006, after they proved themselves on Toonami Jetstream. Before that, you could say back in fall of 2005 when Naruto premiered in September, Bobobo premiered in October, and IGPX premiered in November. But even so, that's not in the same month. It was par for the course for weekday Toonami to only air 1 new show at a time, or only air 1 or 2 premieres at a time. Sure, there were times when both Dragon Ball series were in premieres, and even times when both of those were in premieres and they had premieres on top of that. But consider back then they had a whole lot more money to work with, and the ratings were through the roof. Right now, we're building from the ground up. Obviously, there's some growing pains. Obviously, things aren't going to be amazing right out of the gate. But give them a break. They're trying. And that's the thing that absolutely gets me. The argument that they're just using Toonami for its fans. This is the television business. It is a business of supply and demand. It is a business in which viewers watch to make these shows money through advertisement. When you're dealing with a block of niche programming, of course you're going to rely on the existing fans. For a very long time, Adult Swim has been wagering its casual viewers against its hardcore viewers on Saturday nights, assuming because on Saturday nights, not a whole lot of adults are watching television unless they're watching sports or movies. They're not going to get a whole lot of casual viewership. The thing that makes Saturdays work is the combination of both the dedicated viewership and the casual viewership. The dedicated viewership is watching the anime anytime, every week, without fail. The casual viewership might tune in for King of the Hill or Family Guy or The Boondocks. And they might stick around for Bleach, because Bleach does pretty well with the casual viewership. That late at night on a Saturday, you basically have to depend on viewers that are going to watch regardless. Now, there is a danger in that, and I can understand the argument that they will think that they can play absolutely anything and people are going to watch. That's not true at all, because there have been many, many, many unsuccessful shows that have aired on Adult Swim and were quickly removed. But the thing is, they're not playing anime because it's going to get them good ratings. They're playing anime because they want to play anime. They understand that if they put on Family Guy or Robot Chicken late on a Saturday night, it's nigh guaranteed to get way better ratings than any Japanese cartoon. However, because they play those shows endlessly every week, Monday through Friday plus Sunday, they want a little bit more variety, and Mike Laszlo has gone on record to say that they will play anime once a week just to play something different. They have made it very clear how much they adore Cowboy Bebop, Ghost in the Shell, FLCL, and the Big O, and Mike Laszlo really loves Astro Boy. There is no doubt in my mind that they could manage to come up with an all-comedy lineup, even without the Fox reruns, that would at least match or surpass the current anime lineup. It's pretty much a given that anybody up at 3 a.m. who isn't a devout anime fan is going to be more interested in watching frat boy comedies than serial action dramas. One might keep them awake for a few laughs as they come off their buzz, and the other is going to put them immediately to sleep. We actually saw on the night that they preempted the anime block and played nothing but Star Wars specials and a few episodes of the Clone Wars, the comedy airing around 3 a.m. did exponentially better than any of the anime have done in that time slot in probably ever. We're talking 1 million total viewers at 3 a.m. We're talking 1 million total viewers at 4 a.m. I'm gonna guess the majority of that is actually over 18. Whereas the anime regularly airing in those 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. time slots will get maybe 500,000 total viewers. And the 18 to 49 or 18 to 34 of that would be probably 250,000. Now, mind you, that's not bad, particularly compared to other networks. But it's not good for Adult Swim if you compare it to their weekdays, where shows airing at 4 a.m. will get over 1 million viewers easy. Saturday's just a plain bad day to air anything. And Sunday actually hasn't been doing that well lately either. But the point I'm trying to get across is they don't need anime to succeed. The fact that they want anime to succeed is great. We should be thanking them for giving a crap, especially now that they're really giving a crap and attempting to bring back the greatest action block ever made. However, if you don't like what they're selling, don't watch. It's really as simple as that. Just don't watch. But I want anybody out there hearing this to give shows like Dead Man Wonderland and Casshern an honest chance before you close the door on them. I, like so many other Toonami faithful, would love to see some of those old shows back on the air. Outlaw Star would fit in great. Various Gundams would fit in great. Tenchi would fit in great. Rurouni Kenshin, Yu Yu Hakusho, and of course the first season of The Big O. But right now they're not dealing with a whole lot of money and they have to prove themselves. And speaking of that, anyone arguing that they should have waited doesn't understand how this is working. They're getting the funding for this from William Street, and there's no reason to believe that they would have more money to fund the block if they had waited even longer. On the contrary, they needed to get the ball rolling as soon as possible in order to strike the iron while it's hot, as well as build support for the block over the summer months when they don't have a whole lot of competition other than movies. Yes, it's a small start. Yes, it's not like the Toonami we used to have. But the promos are great, the bumpers are great, Tom is hilarious, as always. But there's so much love going into this project from people at William Street who used to work on Toonami. And Jason DeMarco is working on this even though it's not part of his job. He's not getting paid to do the work for Toonami. He's getting paid to do other things. And he's just doing Toonami because he loves Toonami just as much as we do. The only constant in the world is change. We can't expect Toonami to be exactly like it was. We can't put Toonami in a box of our own conceived expectations for it. Toonami is much bigger than any single lineup that block ever had. It's much bigger than any batch of shows. James, you do not get to define what Toonami is and what it isn't. If it's a wave of action shows airing together in a unified block, hosted by Tom, and they call it Toonami, what right do you have to say it's not Toonami? Let me tell you, before April 1st of this year, I was over the cancellation of Toonami. It was no big deal to me. I don't need Toonami to watch anime. There's a lot of people out there who say that there's absolutely no more point to having Toonami because anime is everywhere around the internet. Anime fans, get this through your heads. If you go on Crunchyroll and watch anime subtitled, Toonami is probably not for you. Toonami is for the viewers who have no idea what kinds of action animation exist. Toonami is for the people who aren't familiar with this material already. Toonami is for the people who have never seen Cowboy Bebop. Toonami is for the people who have never seen Bleach. Toonami is for the people who have never seen Casshern, or Dead Man Wonderland, or Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, or Ghost in the Shell, the standalone complex. Back in the day, Toonami wasn't for people who were watching bootleg fan subs of Dragon Ball Z. Do you guys not understand that anime needs exposure in order to sell better? This industry is going through all kinds of problems, and so many companies are getting shut down because there's no exposure point. You can't go to Target and buy practically any anime other than Miyazaki movies and Dragon Ball Z. You can go to Walmart and get a few of those things, and you can go to Best Buy and get a few of those things, but they're drastically cutting back. In order for people to even know that this stuff exists, it needs an exposure point. Saturday nights at midnight till 6 a.m. is not the best exposure point. But it's something. It's much more than the Funimation channel, which hardly anybody gets. It's like you guys don't even want there to be more anime fans. And before you go accusing me of saying Toonami is a anime block, it's an action cartoon block. The shows can come from anywhere, as long as they're action cartoons. My hope for this Toonami is that it grows into a fantastic exposure point for Japanese animation, as well as any other action animation targeted to adults that they can get their hands on. There isn't a whole lot out there other than movies, but they could certainly play those DC movies. Toonami prided itself on its quality. If we could have a quality 6-hour block of action animation on television that gives people an idea of what kinds of great action animations out there, then we could possibly get even more action animation on television. As an action animation fan, I revel in the idea. Do you see the lack of adult-targeted action animation on television? It's pretty blatant. There's that long-standing stigma that any cartoon that isn't a raunchy comedy in primetime or late night is for kids. The very concept of an action animation cartoon for adults generally eludes the American populace. I want that to change. Don't you want that to change? As always, Toonami is an experiment. They're trying out a few things, they're getting pretty bold with stuff like Dead Man Wonderland, and they're offering a solid block of action animation. I think it takes a lot of gall to say that that isn't Toonami. That all of that work is just Adult Swim action with a new rapper. Can't you see the passion that's going into this experiment? Apparently you can't, and you're going as far as to biting the hand that feeds you. You know what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you? You don't get fed. James, people that act like you do are why we can't have nice things. James, you keep saying that they're just using the Toonami fans to get views for the action block. Well, what do you think Cartoon Network was using the Toonami brand for? At the end of the day, Cartoon Network and Adult Swim want the exact same thing out of Toonami. They're drawing attention to their action programming to get views, to get advertisers, to make money. Money. They're not a charity. And you say that they don't give a crap, even though they met the demand to bring Toonami back, and that they're so diabolical for doing it at all, because the only intention they had was to make money. You say you understand the television business and that you know people in the industry. You don't know jack crap if you think Cartoon Network and Adult Swim didn't want the exact same thing out of the Toonami brand. This isn't the case when one was this shining knight here to bring action cartoons for the masses, to rescue us from our boredom, and the other is just trying to make a quick cash-in on fandom desires. They both wanted money. And you know what? I don't mind being used if they give me what I want. That's consumerism. If you actually sat here and listened to that entire thing, James, I applaud you. And you're probably thinking it was better when I was just posting 5 or so messages at a time on your videos. But hey, if you're gonna post an opinionated video on YouTube, you're gonna get comments. Well, either that or people just won't give a crap and won't even respond, but we both know you enjoy the attention. Well, haters gonna hate, as they say, and people have been complaining about the Toonami lineup and the Toonami block for pretty much as long as it has existed. So, I guess that is one thing that doesn't change. Huh. I really think William Street is doing a great job bringing back Toonami. They don't have a lot to work with right now, but I have faith that they are going to do a great job. And they're not holding good shows hostage, forcing us to watch bad shows. If you don't like the shows, don't watch. But there is one thing that was made very clear the past 2 Saturdays. Toonami's back, bitches. Better recognize.